In this lesson, we're going to begin to allocate some lighting to our scene, and we'll also start to explore the material editor in V-Ray. Okay, to begin with, just double click on V1 Ren, and we're going to bring up a new layer. So previously we've been working on light A, make a new layer, V-Ray lights. Now we can work with the Rhino lights by all means, but in terms of exploring the software at this stage, we'll be creating a new lighting system today. So we're just going to click on those lights individually so they don't affect our scene. We're going to go to Properties box, click the Lighting tab, and we're going to disable each of those lights. Okay, so we've got those disabled. We'll just scroll from one to the other. There we go, they're all disabled. And we'll go to the Layers property box and we'll turn those layers off, or those lights off, so they don't clutter our scene. The first light that we're going to be putting in the scene, which in many cases is the only light required, will be a sunlight system. So it's a traffic light design, so for the most part it's going to be illuminated by a natural light source. We can simply click that light source, manipulate that into whatever position we require, or alternatively we can click the manual control off and we can position ourselves on a world map or a scrolling pull down in order to choose an appropriate location. Now generally I find the best way to work with this is with the manual control. So you can see I've just tabbed that on and off, and I'm going to manipulate that using the left hand mouse into a position on the upper right hand side of our image. So we can see this moves it down into below our horizon plane. There's flat on the horizon plane, and that would be about 10-11 o'clock in the morning, and coming from basically 45 degrees but on the upper right hand side. So we can click OK on that now, simply place it anywhere on the top view, and you can see it's placed there in screen. We can just drag that out of shot for the most part so it doesn't clutter things up, because it, as a directional light source, as a sunlight light source, is regardless of where we place it on the screen, it will have the same lighting effect in the space. So we'll just do a quick test render on that now. So you can see how significant that rendering time was, maybe about 5 seconds while it was paused. And you can see how significantly the lighting now, with the placement of a sunlight system, has now begun to illuminate our scene. We need to increase the exposure at a later stage, but for our initial preliminary work, this is quite good. Now, one way that we need to improve the scene is to soften our shadows. So to begin with, to show you how to do that, we'll just click that off for the moment. We'll go back to our sunlight system, open up our Layers Manager and click onto our Properties tab, and we'll scroll across to the Lighting tab, and we're modifying if we click the Modify Sun, we can change its relative position, but all we need to do at this stage is just change the size slightly on the sun. So we're going to go up to 20. There we go, and click that off, and I'm going to click the rendering. And you can see it's rendering relatively quickly at this stage, given the fact that it's quite simple. And you can see on the screen there how much that's softened by increasing the size of the sun. That's softened the shadows on our ground level backdrop. So in order to get a more diffused lighting effect using a sunlight system, that's one way that it can be achieved. Okay, now let's begin to allocate materials. So previously we've allocated all our materials using the Rhino native material editor, and that's perfectly acceptable because all of those materials can be transported very easily from one program to the next, whether you're rendering in Flamingo NXT or Rhino or V-Ray. Those native materials will travel across. So if you're operating between multiple operators, that's the best course of action to take. However, for the purpose of learning V-Ray at this stage, it's important to become familiar with the material editor that's in V-Ray, and normally I would use that for the specialist materials. but on this occasion we're going to reallocate the materials to our model via this renderer throughout. I'm just going to pause there. So just while we were paused there, what we've had is a material editor lockup. And again, we're using this to good effect. It serves to illustrate is that when we get additional plugins in a variety of programs, it can complicate our procedures. So what we've done is we've shut down the program and rebooted it, and now we should be back on track. So no problems now. We need to allocate our first material. So we're going to do the hazard yellow. So I'm going to create yellow, scroll down to standard, and you can see it on screen there. The first way to allocate our colors is simply directly via the color tab. So in this particular case, we're just simply going to allocate it as a blue color on screen. Just by way of reference, we'll change it back to hazard yellow shortly. And now we're going to rename that color. So halfway down on the left-hand side there, you can see rename material. We'll call it V-Ray Hazard Yellow. And then we're going to allocate it via layer. So we click OK. We right-click on our marker, scroll down to Apply Material to Layer, and then we scroll down to where it says Hazard Layer. So this is the advantage of allocating our materials via layer, because then editing these at a later stage becomes significantly easier. So we simply allocate that onto the screen, and you can see if we just come in on the editor now, you can see that that color has been allocated to the base layer. Now let's just modify that color now so we can edit that color. So we left click on the materials tab. We go back to our material editor. We're going to work on the color tab. So we're going to allocate that material, and you'll notice this is similar to what we've done in Rhino previously. Now we're allocating the color via the RGB channel. Okay, and it will be 251 by 195 by 27. Click OK. We can close that, and you can see now that that color has been allocated in the hazard yellow color. Next, let's look at the feet. So we're repeating the procedure. So left click on the material editor, right click on See Materials, scroll down to Create Material, Standard Material. We're going to rename it. Scroll down to Rename Material, and this time we'll make it Feet. Okay, click OK. This time we're going to allocate the color in a slightly more precise fashion. So if we're just doing quick color allocations, we simply press this color tab here, but we can also do it via another path, because when we're dealing with V-Ray materials of a more complicated nature, we start to dig under the M tab, and we're going to allocate the color this time, Texture A color. You can see now we're going to change that color to just plain black. So just on the color selector there, preview it. It's going to be black anyway. Click OK. We can preview it on this screen. You can see that that gives us a black ball. And this time we'll allocate the material also via layer. So a repeat procedure. We scroll down through the various sections. There's feet. Click OK. And the material color will then be allocated to the feet. Okay, we just shut the layer editor for a moment. So I've just quickly rendered that while we were paused, and you can now see quite clearly the dark color on the rubber feet has been applied to the base of the foot. So in this lesson, what we've learned how to do is place a sunlight lighting system in our scene, fine-tune the size of the light in order to give us a more diffused shadow effect in the space. And we've also begun to dig into the V-Ray material editor, just allocating 2 basic materials to our scene. Okay, in our next lesson, we're going to continue allocating V-Ray materials up the body of the traffic light design.